Hello, everyone. Good to be back on this stage. I hope you're doing all great. What a massive program we got, and we're looking forward to the next panel. Absolutely amazing. Buona giornata, people from Italy, and of course, bienvenidos a Spobis en Hamburgo, as the Spanish League is also presented. Raphael Honigstein, when he comes on stage, is always very, very internationally. So we do see the CEOs of the major leagues in Europe, and of course the UEFA, and really looking forward to that panel. So have fun, Raphael Honigstein and his team and his squad.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending this, probably the highlight of today. It's very rarely, if not the only time, that we see representatives from the 4 major leagues and UEFA along on the same stage. Let me introduce our distinguished panels today. Home advantage, Marc Lenz, Geschäftsführer, CEO of the DFL. Luigi di Siervo, CEO of Serie. We have Mathieu Moreuil, representing the Premier League. He's the Director of International Football Relations and EU Affairs. We have Andrea Traverso from UEFA. He's the Director of Financial Sustainability and Research. And Javier Tebas, the President of La Liga. Gentlemen, welcome. This is about the challenges facing the European leagues and maybe the solutions, along with a few talking points. I'm sure we're going to get into it. But to give you a bit of a structure, I think we're going to talk about the calendar first, then going on to the finances, and then into governance. And of course, these things are all interconnected as the flashpoints and the hot points of European football crystallize around these issues. Now, we all know that football can be defined as a fight over time and space, but that fight is increasingly also fought off the pitch when it comes to getting time with the players and finding space for the various games. How are the leagues affected by the newly expanded format of the Champions League as well as the Club World Cup? I'm going to start with Mathieu, with you, with the Premier League.
Guten Morgen. Well, how are we affected by those new competitions? Well, that's very simple. This is more and more difficult to schedule our matches, and this is more and more difficult for us to maintain what is really key for our competitions, which is the competitive balance. The fact that we have competitions which are, organized in a way which is, uncertain. The fact that we can have teams winning matches even if they are underdogs week in, week out, and that's the key thing for us. So we recognize the ability from others to organize their own competitions, but the fact remains, domestic leagues have not changed their format for 30 years or so, and the other organizations are increasing their competitions or creating new ones. When there is a dialogue with other competition organizers, I think we are okay. We can make our points, and that's the case with UEFA. Although the new format creates a lot of issues, and we can discuss that later. But when it comes to FIFA, there is absolutely no dialogue with the leagues or with the players' unions, and that's a big problem. And that's exactly why leagues and players' union decided to lodge a complaint with the European Commission a couple of months ago, because really the calendar has reached a tipping point.
Luigi, what's your view? Is it a complement to what Serie A are providing, or is it increasingly a rivalry, a competition that you have to jostle for space with?
Il calendario quest'anno è davvero un incubo, nel senso che fino ad oggi sono state programmate oltre il 50% delle nostre partite hanno dovuto subire degli spostamenti a causa del calendario della nuova Champions League e una situazione altrettanto complicata si verificherà all'esito del Mondiale per club. Come riferiva la Premier League, siamo dinanzi ad una situazione in grande cambiamento che vede come dire, le grandi leghe qui rappresentate oggi che non hanno cambiato come dire, il proprio format, il numero di squadre, per cui la Premier, la Liga e la Serie A continuano ad avere un campionato con 380 gare, sono rimaste le stesse, come lo stesso è rimasta la struttura della Coppa Nazionale. Questa cosa in realtà la FIFA e la UEFA hanno scelto una strada diversa, hanno deciso di incrementare significativamente il numero delle gare e questo evidentemente è un grande problema per le leghe, per i tifosi e per gli atleti. Come è stato ben riferito, il punto centrale è che la UEFA ha accettato un dialogo costruttivo con noi, la FIFA, come dire, non l'ha mai fatto e quindi questo è il motivo per cui abbiamo intrapreso con gli atleti, col sindacato degli atleti, un caso legale.
Marc, what's the Bundesliga's position in this? I mean, you stand alone in terms of the size of the competition. You can maybe adjust a little bit more easily to this new world. I saw even this week the German FA are expanding the cup now to have more matches for the quarterfinals. Where does that leave the Bundesliga? Is there a danger from your point of view, that saturation point in terms of both the availability of matches for the consumer but also for the players? Is that being reached now?
Well, Raphael, indeed, I think there is an overall tendency in terms of developing European football. European football obviously at a peak with now an industry of around 35 billion, 20 billion out of the top 5 leagues. And development is part of it. I think we are all clear of that, to basically address challenges and to see development. However, the expansion of competitions overall is a difficulty that also we as a Bundesliga obviously see, and some of the points have already been mentioned. I think there are 3 core challenges with it. One is the risk of cannibalization of media rights. We see that in other domestic leagues already, like within the Bundesliga and the current tender, we were good, but still there is a significant risk of cannibalization. Second, there is a risk based on distribution, on competitive imbalance. And the third one is the scheduling aspect. Obviously, with 18 teams playing the Bundesliga, we have a bit more flexibility compared to leagues with 20 clubs. Nevertheless, it is a severe scheduling issue, because you might know that in terms of scheduling, we have an advance of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, where we need to speak with the authorities, with the police, with clubs, with fans, etc. And there are some leagues who already need to react by different formats and, well, the time that we basically know who qualifies for playoffs of the UCC, etc. That leads to a time in terms of scheduling that's super reduced. Like, our major concern, yes, scheduling, but to addition, cannibalization of media rights and competitive imbalance.
Andrea, we already heard that maybe UEFA has gone about this in a slightly more constructive way compared to FIFA. Are you happy with how the new format looks, and also do you feel that the concerns of the leagues have been taken into account?
First of all, I mean, I completely share the opinion of my predecessor, saying that there have been a very constructive dialogue. I mean, it has been a discussion that has going on for many years, 5, 6 years, with plenty of simulations, plenty of discussions, plenty of negotiations. And I think that, I mean, the results of the new format are under the eyes of everyone. A very compelling, very exciting competition, very unpredictable. 3.55 goals in average per match. I mean, this is an historic results. 64 goals, I think, scored in the last round, where we had all the matches that were played at the same time. So this reform is not the result of a unilateral decision of UEFA. Is the result of a constructive dialogue and of a consensus of all the stakeholders. So this is to say, and of course, yes, there are a little bit more matches, but we are not planning to increase any new matches moving forward. So the problem might be that of other competitions that have added then on top and that are creating, of course, the situations that these gentlemen are, recalling today.
Javier, what's your view on the overall constraints of the calendar and where this is going with more and more games and everyone trying to grab a bit more of the calendar?
Hombre, pues vamos hacia el desastre. Y vamos hacia el desastre porque es verdad que UEFA cuando inició este nuevo formato de Champions, un proceso de diálogo del que yo participé y en el que se dio el ok al nuevo formato, siempre y cuando veamos luego los efectos. Pero es que en esa carrera de competiciones se dio el ok al nuevo formato y después ponen el Mundial de Clubes, que nos causa un perjuicio importante durante 2 temporadas como mínimo a nuestras competiciones. Pero es que UEFA lo apoya. Entonces, claro, cuando nosotros, o por lo menos yo, di el apoyo a UEFA al nuevo formato, que habría que ver las repercusiones económicas, que luego lo toco, UEFA tenía que habernos apoyado y no crear el Mundial de Clubes, porque eso ha vuelto a comprimir el calendario. Claro, si yo llego a saber, en el año que di el ok al nuevo formato, que después iba a haber un Mundial de Clubes que se ha inventado la FIFA, hubiese dicho que no, porque ya nos genera un problema el calendario. Por lo tanto, muy bien el proceso como se hizo inicial, pero muy mal que se han puesto nuevas competiciones después con el apoyo de la UEFA en FIFA, ¿no? Y luego otro de los riesgos más importantes que lo ha apuntado Marc, Lenz, hay que pensar que la industria del fútbol son las competiciones nacionales. O sea, si no hemos cambiado los formatos en 30 años es porque es una industria muy consolidada que crea miles de puestos de trabajo en toda Europa, en cada país. Hay un dato que hay que recordar siempre, ¿no? Hay 60.000 jugadores de fútbol profesional y más de 2.500 clubes de fútbol profesional. ¿Qué efectos económicos tiene el nuevo formato de Champions sobre todas estas competiciones? Hay que ir viéndolo, pero los primeros datos que estamos viendo en la primera temporada en las ligas pequeñas y medianas, no tanto en las grandes ligas, hay un efecto muy importante y muy grave. Hay una canibalización, una disminución de los derechos nacionales. Las que estamos viendo están bajando muchísimo, los ingresos de la Champions suben y un segundo efecto es el reparto de esos mayores ingresos que tiene la Champions. Pues yo he visto el último reparto que se ha hecho, el que se va a hacer de acuerdo con la clasificación de los grupos, aunque falte todavía una parte del playoff, y va todavía en nuestras propias competiciones, aquellos clubes que juegan en Europa, aquellos clubes que juegan la Champions, va a crear un gap muy elevado dentro de nuestras propias competiciones. Lo que va a hacer que sean menos competitivas y todo a medio-largo plazo, porque en el fútbol somos muy cortoplacistas, pero si uno ve a medio-largo plazo, vamos camino del desastre, de unas ligas nacionales con muchos menos ingresos, con mucha menos competitividad y luego unas competiciones supranacionales donde se van a concentrar una serie de clubes que van a hacer un gap muy importante en las ligas nacionales. Y eso, si uno no ve lo que va a pasar en 4 o 5 años, no somos buenos dirigentes de fútbol. Hay que ver lo que va a pasar dentro de 5 años. Los clubes tienen que ver lo que va a pasar la temporada. Pero los que dirigimos instituciones tenemos que ver qué efectos tienen estas decisiones en 4 o 5 años, ¿no?
If I could pick maybe 1 or 2 points up with you, Andrea. UEFA are always in a difficult position. They have to balance the interest of the big, powerful clubs, always pushing for more revenue and perhaps for more games as well, with the wider interest of the football family when it comes to the leagues, the smaller associations, the smaller clubs. Is there anything you could have done differently, especially to Javier's point, when it comes to supporting the Club World Cup? Is that something that UEFA perhaps should have taken a more critical stance towards? What do you think?
I mean, these are always very complex discussions that take place with also the other confederations. And I think, this is that are taking place at the political level, which obviously, I was not involved in those discussions. But coming back a little bit to the point that Javier was mentioning before about, the financial gap that might be created in European football. This is obviously a trend, the one of the concentration towards the top of the pyramid that we are seeing for many years. And this has accelerated, of course, with the pandemic. And this is definitely one of the challenges that we will have all to look into moving forward. But I mean, pointing the finger just to UEFA and saying that is UEFA the cause of this problem, this is totally wrong. I mean, I think that imbalances exist at every level of the pyramid, not ultimately at league level too. So this is a common issue that we have to tackle all together. It's not just UEFA creating it, not at all. This is wrong. And I would like just to remember one element. When it comes to the new format of the Champions League, I mean, if we look at the solidarity and the amount of money that is now distributed in terms of solidarity, moved from 175 million in the previous cycle to 308, if I'm not mistaken, so an increase by 80%. So I think that this is clearly a sign that UEFA is looking at those kind of issues.
Yeah, with Andrea on the point that obviously it should not, and it is not a finger pointing towards UEFA, but it's, I think, a general challenge that we see in terms of concentration of revenues overall, and obviously been fortified by also a development of competition and distribution schemes. However, from our perspective, and we are just coming out of a distribution discussion in Germany, and I think it is everywhere the same, clubs are not traveling to Frankfurt or to Lyon, or to Madrid, or to London, in order to ask for less. Of course, it's a no-brainer. So clubs want to participate more, they contribute more, and they have the feeling that they should obviously receive more out of a distribution scheme. So from my perspective, one of the core discussions beyond distribution is going to be sooner or later on the regulatory side. Because what we need to do in European football is to reduce pressure from the top. Of course, top clubs are asking for more because salaries are getting higher, transfer costs are getting higher, competitiveness overall is getting more difficult, and therefore financials need to be secured. Fully understood from a top league and top club perspective. However, I think this is our main task, everyone who is sitting here, to basically also put in regulation that is reducing the pressure on top. That it's not about the additional money and the additional euro being earned, but it's rather about spending patterns, reducing cost levels, that the pressure is basically decreasing.
Solo un tema por decirle a Andrea, yo no es que señale a la UEFA constantemente, pero hay temas que sí señalo. O sea, y en ese tema señalo a UEFA, porque al igual que nosotros decidimos, venga, adelante con el nuevo formato de Champions, cogiendo varias semanas del calendario que sabíamos que nos podíamos apretar, ellos tenían que habernos preguntado, oye, ¿qué os parece el Mundial de Clubes? ¿Que llevamos una postura conjunta? ¿Afecta nuestras competiciones nacionales? Nos tenían que haber preguntado y no nos preguntaron. Claro que son temas políticos muy... Claro, lo fácil es ir, en un sitio digo una cosa, en otro apoyo otro, pero no me preocupo lo que pasa en mi competición, en mi industria, ¿no? Y eso es un tema importante. Y luego lo de solidaridad. Está muy bien, pero no sirve, es muy poco para aquellos clubes que no juegan en Europa. Nosotros tenemos 14 clubes que no juegan en Europa, todas las temporadas, y aquí hay muchos. Y ahí hay un auténtico problema que se va generando a medio plazo. No hace falta un estudio de la Universidad de Harvard, ¿eh? Porque aquí, siempre que no queremos solucionar un problema en el fútbol, vamos a hacer un estudio. Y así lo tiramos para adelante, habrán cambiado los dirigentes de los clubes, y vendrán otros con otras ideas, y así. No hace falta un estudio. Esto es un dato real, que solo con ver los datos en 2 horas uno se da cuenta. Pensemos y sentémonos que estamos poniendo en peligro el fútbol. Y no voy a entrar si es emocionante el formato o no es emocionante, no entro en esa cuestión. Entro en las consecuencias económicas a la industria, que es lo que nos tiene que preocupar a la industria. Y termino, perdona. Estamos generando más dinero a los jugadores que más ganan del mundo. No a los 2.500 que tiene la industria del fútbol.
Yeah, I mean, just to contribute on that. I mean, I think we all agreed that there was a good process with UEFA. The result is the new format. It has good sides. It also has consequences on domestic leagues, big, medium, small leagues, which we really need to analyze and to take lessons from. And I think the key thing is really to get some kind of review clause with UEFA. But I'm confident that because we've got a process taking place, and we're part of the decision-making process. I'm really confident that we're going to be able to come up with the other leagues, have discussions with UEFA and the clubs, and make sure we adjust this new format, because the first outcomes of it, both in terms of scheduling, in terms of revenue distribution, it could create serious issues going forward. So I think as long as we can keep the process, the good process that we had, alive, and we can have some kind of discussions about the next seasons, I think we're on good tracks. If not, that's going to be a big issue.
We already heard about the need for financial regulation and cost control. I want to dig down deeper a little bit into that. But before I do that, maybe with a request for brief answers, has the Champions League in its current format killed off the threat of the Super League? Oh, sorry, the Unify League it's called now, yeah. Marc.
Well, difficult question, to be honest. I would say generally, obviously, the European Court of Justice says that there need to be criteria in order to register competition. I think governing bodies are doing well in order to define those now. It might have reduced the pressure, but from my perspective, if the polarization is continuing that way, and I'm coming back to revenue distribution as well as regulations, if that concentration is increased over next years, I think the risk of a Super League is very high, because we have a shift of clubs that basically lead away, and therefore I think it is in all our tasks together with UEFA on basically having a good competition, a good supranational competition, good domestic competitions, and find the right tools in terms of distributions as well as regulatory side in order to avoid exactly that development.
Bueno, aquí él ha dado, Marc, el tema económico, y coincido con él, pero el problema de la Superliga no lo veamos solo un tema económico, también es un tema de gobernanza. El modelo, aunque Unified no lo ha hecho público todavía, la clave es la gobernanza. ¿Quién va a gobernar el fútbol europeo? Y ahí es donde está la clave. Y conociendo al máximo instigador de la Liga, la Superliga, que es Florentino Pérez del Real Madrid, yo sé qué modelo de gobernanza quiere. Bueno, de hecho, solo un ejemplo. En España la Liga tiene más de 100 demandas del Real Madrid contra la Liga. El modelo es o haces lo que yo quiero o no hay. Y la Liga no respeta un club, un voto, no respeta las mayorías de la Liga, es el modelo de la oligarquía, de los ricos, de que ellos quieren decidir. Pues está el tema económico y ese. Y estando el presidente del Real Madrid, siempre hay un peligro. Florentino Pérez es muy tenaz, muy terco, que se dice en castellano, está muy encima de las cosas y siempre gana. O sea, va a seguir y está siguiendo. O sea, no hay más.
Credo che qui sul palco abbiate un esempio lampante di come il calcio europeo è gestito in maniera democratica. Tutte le nostre leghe, ciascuna club, anche l'ultimo della nostra competizione, come dire, esprime un voto e si esprime. Quindi la maggioranza è una maggioranza che rappresenta tutto il calcio. Il modello invece portato avanti, prima la Superlega, adesso con la nuova formulazione Unify, è un modello legato alle oligarchie. E questo è contro il football europeo ed è il motivo per cui prima i tifosi, la UEFA, a cui dobbiamo dire grazie per quella battaglia, ma anche tutti noi abbiamo combattuto e sconfitto quell'idea di modello. Io, differentemente da quello che pensano alcuni anche qua sul palco, credo che quell'esperienza sia definitivamente morta. Cioè non credo che abbia nessuna possibilità di procedere avanti. Anche perché, ed è questo il punto, se vogliamo, più critico, i grandi club, che sono sempre il motore di queste iniziative, sono già all'interno di un sistema che col nuovo modello di Champions League le premia in maniera significativa. Facciamo due esempi. Per quanto riguarda la Serie A, la squadra dell'Inter di Milano ha ottenuto per questo primo, diciamo, a questo punto della stagione, 95 milioni di euro come cifra da parte della UEFA. Se dovesse vincere il campionato, non otterrebbe quella cifra come valore complessivo di tutto il campionato. E questo vale ancora di più per le leghe medie. Parlavamo prima nel nostro board con alcuni colleghi di leghe importanti, anche se medie, in termini sportivi, che ci rappresentavano come il valore che le squadre di quel paese hanno raggiunto soltanto con questa fase diciamo generale, di classifica generale, vale già più di 20 volte il valore del loro campionato. E qui si capisce quello che è il vantaggio di una lega come quella italiana, che ha saputo portare 4 squadre diverse a vincere negli ultimi 5 anni, ed è il rischio che invece in altri campionati certe situazioni di forza si cristallizzino, perché una squadra che ha 20 volte il fatturato della seconda sicuramente l'anno successivo si riqualificherà alla Champions League e questo gap tenderà a salire. Se poi sarà così brava di andare avanti nelle fasi di eliminazione diretta o ancor più andare al mondiale per club, questo gap diventa incolmabile per sempre. Quindi se noi vogliamo continuare a vedere dei campionati nazionali dove la competizione sia decisa idealmente all'ultima giornata, dobbiamo, con la UEFA, in accordo, in armonia, guardare dentro ai risultati e capire come intervenire. Perché questo modello, che probabilmente o sicuramente funziona in termini televisivi e di spettacolo, sta generando delle sperequazioni che, dal nostro punto di vista, che gestiamo delle leghe domestiche, stanno, e lo vediamo in prospettiva, come diceva Tebas, nel medio-lungo periodo rischiano di creare una frattura all'interno dei campionati tra chi ha avuto la capacità, e questo, mi permetto di dire, sta in questi anni creando un aumento dei costi, perché le squadre, pur di entrare in questa fase, come dire, di spinta iniziale, dove si crea la distanza, dove i ricavi esplodono, stanno negli ultimi 2 anni, 3 anni, investendo molto più delle loro possibilità. È una scommessa diabolica di riuscire a entrare nelle squadre che faranno la Champions League, e quindi questo genera un effetto collaterale non irrilevante che gonfia significativamente i costi.
Andrea, have you slayed the Super League dragon?
The what? So I think this would be my answer. Unify what? I mean, 1, 2 clubs? I don't think it's worth even talking about it at this stage. I mean, I think we have a great competition. We have to look at this competition. Everyone's happy, and this is the most important thing. And whatever, as these gentlemen are saying, whatever discussions has to take place all together. There should be a dialogue. Anti-democratic attempt to try to change things do not work. And they didn't work, and they will not work.
Mathieu, anything to add? I mean, you have new regulation coming in, political regulation, that have already said we will not allow clubs to participate in the Super League. So yeah, it's a no-starter, or it's over?
Well, pretty much so. And the UK government wants to intervene to make sure that it doesn't happen. But I think, I agree with Andrea. As long as we've got, good dialogue in Europe between the clubs, the leagues, and UEFA, to make sure that there is a sustainable international competition which fulfills all the criteria and has the potential to please those clubs which aspire to play in Europe, I think we're in a good place. The main principle and the main threat is we've got clubs now who are not interested in domestic competitions anymore. Some clubs just don't want to play their normal competitions. They're not interested in them. And that's where the Super League is really, building some interest and support, or had built some interest and support. And I think we need to be very clear, the bedrock of European football, that's domestic competition. That's where the fans really want to see their clubs and to enjoy their footballs week in, week out. And we have to protect that at league level, at UEFA level, at international level. Domestic football is the basis. There should be a link with European and international football, direct qualification, and international competition have to remain the icing on the cake. If international competitions become the cake, then we all have a huge problem. The leagues, UEFA, and the fans.
Okay, let me move on to finances, and I'm going to stick with you, Mathieu. We've already heard the logic of more and more. More games means bigger squads. Bigger squads means more money for players. But where's the money coming from? TV income is plateauing in Europe, I think is fair to say, at best. So the only way to control costs is from the other side, not on the supply side, but make sure that there is less being spent. At the same time, you have to strike a balance, and I speak to you, Mathieu, because the Premier League has been very good at attracting new investment and new owners who all want to pump money into football. Where does that balance sit between, on the one hand, controlling cost, and you have very strong financial tools for that, the PSR, the financial fair play version of the Premier League has been quite toothy, but at the same time allowing clubs to grow and also attracting new investment in.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing for us is always to try to remain with a model which guarantees that there is competition and competitiveness, and that you don't lock in the system and basically you don't have always the same clubs winning. That's always the principle behind what we're trying to achieve. So you're right, at the Premier League we've got a model where we encourage investment, where we traditionally also in the UK we've always been open to new investors, and we have a very private system. The Premier League is a company. It's very different from organizations in other countries. In my country, in France, the league has a delegation of public service from the state, so you're in a very different model. However, you're right, we're also trying now to control the costs. We've got strong regulations that we are enforcing. It is sometimes difficult. We have gone through points deduction. It's very tough, but we have to do it. We've got a rule book and we have to enforce it. We are working with our clubs to define new rules going forward, which are aligned with UEFA financial fair play rules, so squad cost ratio, and we're trying also to try to work on an anchoring system where we are trying to get a bit of a framework for investment in order to keep that competitive balance, so we don't have clubs we can invest, hundreds and hundreds of millions, and others we can't really compete. So really, that's the key thing. We're still open to investment, and we're still looking at increasing our revenues in the UK and beyond. And we're also trying to control the costs. And on that, I think we're very much aligned with what UEFA has done in the past and is doing. And yeah, I mean, it's challenging, but once you have your rules, you have to enforce them.
I think Mathieu said it is very challenging. I mean, it's probably the most challenging thing that we are dealing with now for many years. But there is one very important thing, is that we are all united towards this objective, which is the financial sustainability in the long term. Now, one thing is financial sustainability, one thing is competitiveness or competitive balance. And it's totally wrong to think that financial rules can address both items. I mean, competitiveness or competitive balance is much more complicated than just a set of financial rules. But on the financial sustainability regulations, what I would like to say today is that now after the pandemic and after a period where the rules were very much relaxed, they will be enforced for the first time this year, the new financial sustainability rules. So the squad cost ratio is basically this ratio between the amount that clubs can spend on wages with regard to the revenues that they generate. And we have set the limit to 70%. Now, 70% will be the limit that the clubs will need to fulfill next year. This year it will be 80%, it's still 80%. When I say next year, it's basically 2025, the years in which we are already now. But what is good is that many leagues have already aligned themselves to this principle. And I think that in Spain they are doing an excellent job with the cost control system. In England, they are aligning themselves to our regulations. We are really working all together. We had a gathering, which was not a long time ago. And so we will see, but we see the effects. So just to give you an example, revenues at European level has grown again of about 10%. But when it comes to player wages, these have grown just 4.5%. So what does it show? It shows that clubs are starting to adapt, because there are certain clubs that are far beyond the 80% limit or the 70% limit. They have to adapt. So this is lowering down. Now, out of the 235 clubs, we might have 2, 3, 4 clubs that are not respecting the rules. But we are talking about a very small percentage. So the large majority of clubs, they are moving in the right direction. This has to be said, because most of the time, the title in the newspapers is about the bad guys. Yeah, But actually, the large majority of the clubs is going in the right directions. And we will see the CFCB, which is the body that is monitoring the financial situation of all the clubs in Europe, is doing their work these days while we are speaking, and we will see what kind of decisions will be taken from now until the month of May. But we are taking it very seriously, and we had also to take some very tough decisions very recently that fortunately didn't realize because the club respected all the various conditions. But we have rules, and rules must be enforced, and the rules are really tougher than they were before.
No, Andrea, que es verdad que la UEFA hace un buen trabajo, pero marcaría 4 cuestiones, ¿no? Porque estamos todos unidos. Yo creo que esto queda muy bien decirlo, pero yo creo que estamos todos reunidos. Eso de unidos no estoy tan de acuerdo, ¿no? Incluso dentro de los fair play financieros en Europa hay modelos diferentes, el alemán, el nuestro, Italia, Inglaterra, que marcan claras diferencias incluso de competitividad de nuestros clubes con el resto de Europa. Y aquí la UEFA, que debería tener una función global en todo el fútbol, no solo de sus equipos que compiten en Europa, que no olvidemos, porque lo ha dicho Andrea, nuestros 235 clubes, no, el fútbol europeo no son 235 clubes, son miles de clubes o cientos de clubes, y en las grandes ligas hay muchos más clubes que no están en Europa, y claro, hay que homogeneizar esas normas, y ahí la UEFA tendría que dar un paso adelante para homogeneizar, y yo creo que las ligas, muchas estaríamos de acuerdo en que hay un sistema de fair play financiero más común a toda Europa que afecta a todas las competiciones. Esa es la primera. La segunda, hay un dato que cuando los datos se dan de macroeconomía del fútbol todos juntos, los ingresos de los clubes han subido un 10% y los salarios han quedado un 4%. No es correcto. Hay que analizar cuánto han subido los ingresos de los 20 primeros clubes de Europa y cuánto han subido los salarios, y luego quítame los 20 de Europa y hace el cálculo del resto. Y no es así. Los ingresos del resto no han subido, y como los de arriba han creado un sistema inflacionista, han subido. Es verdad que con macroeconomía parece que han subido poco los salarios, pero si no, haces diferencia a los dos y ves cómo no es verdad. Sino los que más ingresos tienen han subido mucho más los salarios. Si no, nos vamos a los ingresos de los grandes clubes de Europa, salvo que estemos en la Bundesliga o en la Liga, que los tenemos más controlados los salarios de los grandes también, han subido mucho más de un 4%. O sea, y los de abajo, como están teniendo menos ingresos, están bajando los salarios, porque se está haciendo esa brecha. Es los análisis que tenemos que hacer, y UEFA es la única institución de Europa del fútbol que puede homogeneizar todo eso. Entonces, si ya homogeneizamos un campeonato supranacional a través de las ligas nacionales, ¿por qué no UEFA da el paso, se reúne con las ligas y buscamos un sistema más común en todos los países de fair play financiero? Porque hay falta de competitividad. Nuestros clubes, grandes clubes y medianos, y le pasa a la Bundesliga igual, se quejan de que tienen un sistema de control económico que les limitan más su competitividad en Europa, ¿no? Pero también sabemos que si abrimos la mano, pues se van a endeudar, se van a meter a pérdidas económicas y nos iremos a los números de mis otras compañeras ligas. Este año la Serie A creo que ha presentado unas pérdidas globales de 500 millones de euros de sus clubes. La Premier League, 1.000 millones de euros. Nosotros creo que 100 y vosotros creo que habéis ganado 50. Nuestros clubes en global no pierden dinero, van compensando. En cambio, otros van perdiendo dinero. En global hablo de ligas. Eso hay que intentar solucionarlo. Porque, claro, los nuestros y los alemanes competitivamente a nivel económico compiten en menos condiciones. Sí que tiene que ver el fair play financiero y la sostenibilidad económica con la competitividad. Pasa que no queremos abrir ese melón, pero tiene que ver claramente, claramente. Y es esencial para el futuro del fútbol europeo. Porque más ingresos económicos, como sean, no voy a mucha mayor competitividad. Menos ingresos, menos competitividad. Luego están los jugadores que tienen que meter los goles, pero eso seguro que es una máxima que hay que trabajar mucho más.
Yeah, on the general direction of travel, I'm on many points with Javier and with the points that were raised also by Andrea. I think we need to differentiate a little bit between financial sustainability and competitive balance. On the financial sustainability side, like the work that has been done by UEFA over the last 10 to 15 years is tremendous. And we need to be clear about that. Also, the now new regulation in terms of the relative cost cap is heading towards a good direction. But the status quo is still different. The status quo is continuously increasing revenues, even a higher increase in terms of costs, significant clubs and a significant number of clubs with significant deficits that are either covered by equity contributions or a significant debt level, which leads to ownership changes, which leads to high interest costs, etc., and leads overall in European football to significant losses still. So on the financial sustainability side, I think the direction of traveling is correct because we are heading towards lower squad costs, etc. But the current squad costs are still of top leagues between, in the Bundesliga, around 60% squad cost to revenue, La Liga 70%, and then we are at 80 to 85%, which from my perspective is never going to be a healthy ratio. And I think this is exactly the difficult discussions that we are having also between leagues and with UEFA, the point that Mathieu raised. What is a good level of investment? And what are really investments? Because I think if we talk about investments, Mathieu, we are talking about two different things. For me, investments are long-term investments in infrastructure, youth development, etc. I think Mathieu is referring to investments, obviously, on the competitive side, also in squad, etc. And that is a bit of a difference that we see. Overall, if we want to head towards financial sustainability, I think the current regulations are good. What needs to be done is a strict enforcement, because that's the combination of having good regulations, strong enforcement, and real effect on the industry. The other point is, sooner or later, we need to address the issue of also competitive balance. And I agree that current regulations are not addressed for competitive balance because it's a relative cost cap that's for financial sustainability. But there might be regulations that also address the competitive balance. Either it's by distribution or by regulations or any other field, but we need to have that discussion, not only around financial sustainability, but also around competitive balance.
What's Serie A's point of view? I mean, taking everything we've heard so far, it's clear to me that regulation must be supranational rather than national in order to square both those circles, competitive balance internally, but also in Europe, as well as the cost control.
Credo di dover fare, diciamo, dei complimenti sinceri alla UEFA ed Andrea in particolare, che ha gestito in maniera, diciamo, impeccabile il processo del nuovi, diciamo, financial sustainability. Ma questo, come diceva Javier, probabilmente deve essere un po' allargato nel tempo come un elemento che possa aiutare ad uniformare un po' l'attività che tutti i paesi poi fanno al proprio interno. Dal punto di vista dell'Italia siamo probabilmente il fanalino di coda, gli ultimi, come diciamo, Javier l'ha ricordato, arriviamo buoni ultimi, ma il nostro governo ha diciamo, deliberato una nuova autorità indipendente dalla federazione esterna che andrà a fare questo tipo di controllo. È un'autorità che si sta formando in questi mesi e che quindi ci aiuterà ad avere un controllo esterno che ci consenta di normalizzare questi valori. Ma questo tipo di esigenza porta anche delle best practice che possono nascere. Volevo citare quella della Juventus di Torino, perché la Juventus è stata la prima squadra in Italia a aver fatto la seconda squadra, è una sua squadra under 23, e per darvi, come dire, un parametro economico, i ragazzi che negli ultimi 4 anni hanno esordito in Serie A sono 35 e negli ultimi 2 anni sono stati venduti con 140 milioni di euro, per 140 milioni di euro. Questo significa che in una situazione di contrazione dei costi, la logica di un investimento sulla parte, diciamo, di formazione di nuovi talenti, in un contesto che per prima era la Juventus, adesso è partito il Milan, l'Atalanta, arriverà anche l'Inter, ci aiuterà alle grandi squadre, che sono quelle che mandano, come dire, fuori i parametri più importanti, quel tipo di investimento nel nostro campionato, anche sui livelli più bassi, che è estremamente formativo, consente di preparare in tempi brevi tanti ragazzi per poter giocare nei massimi campionati europei. Questo credo che sia una best practice che un sistema più complicato forse di altri, più in difficoltà, ha saputo trovare, ed è una strada che appunto altri club percorreranno.
We're already in injury time, but I think we need to address the issue you just brought up, which is governance, which is increasingly a very hot topic. Can you explain to us, from the Italian point of view, where you see the opportunities, but also the challenges that come with political oversight?
Io credo che noi siamo in un momento importante in Italia perché è il momento in cui finalmente stiamo arrivando a ristrutturare gli stadi. Il problema, il gap più grosso che noi sentiamo nei confronti degli altri campionati è il fatto che abbiamo delle infrastrutture che non sono all'altezza degli anni in cui viviamo. E quindi in questi anni, con l'obiettivo di ospitare parte dell'Europeo del 2034, si sono accelerati una serie di processi molto importanti per realizzare finalmente i nuovi stadi in città importantissime come Milano e Roma. Questo elemento è l'elemento, secondo me, che manca al calcio italiano e per il quale il nostro Ministro dello Sport dovrebbe poter nominare un commissioner che avrebbe la funzione di superare le grandi difficoltà che in Italia esistono legate alla burocrazia. Paradossalmente in questo momento storico non mancano i soldi, non mancano i progetti, non mancano le idee, manca la capacità di trasformare un progetto teorico in la costruzione di un nuovo stadio. Quindi sono convinto che con l'aiuto della politica in questo momento la sfida del calcio italiano per i prossimi 5-6 anni sia quella finalmente di realizzare i nuovi stadi in realtà importanti.
Mathieu, governance is coming. What's the Premier League's view?
Governance is coming, yeah. I mean, there is governance already. It's just government intervention is coming. So we're not against regulation as such. But of course, the devil is in the detail, and it depends on what exactly the UK government will do and how it will intervene into football. I think, you know, there are very good things coming up with government intervention. If the government wants to, you know, make sure there is no possibility for clubs to join breakaway leagues, if there is more stuff done on fan engagement, if the government wants to protect the club's heritage, you know, we're all in favor of that. I think the starting principle shouldn't be that football is broken and nothing works in football, because that's simply not true. Professional football in England, in the UK, and in Europe is a success story. I mean, Javier has mentioned the number of you know, direct economic impact and employment. There are very few sectors where Europe is leading the world, and professional sports and football in particular is one of them. So I think, you know, it's all about what exactly the government wants to do. I think any governments in Europe have to keep in mind that when they intervene, it will have consequences on the competition. And again, it has to be calibrated, and it has to be with direct involvement of all stakeholders. So not an opposition as such, but again, depends on what's on the table, really.
Yeah, taking it one step further on the governance side, I think it is already a good sign that there are quite intensive discussions, I think, overall on the European landscape, and that we can sit here together in closed doors 3 hours before and now an hour in public, more or less speaking exactly about those kind of challenges, because I think that's the way forward. Obviously, we as generally, from a league's perspective, any league in Europe, I think it is important to be at decision-making level, because many of the consequences that we have discussed today on changes on competition format, regulatory side, political development, etc., in the end do have an effect on the backbone of European football. And the backbone of European football are domestic leagues. And therefore it is, from our perspective, and I think we all share that perspective, we discussed it many times, really important to not sit second row in decision making, but first row, because those kind of consequences are pivotal for us, discussions are pivotal for us, and that's what we continuously going to lobby for, sitting at the table in order to have those discussions prior to changes, not only talking about the effects after those changes have been done.
Por enlazar el tema final de Marc. La sentencia del Tribunal de Justicia de la Unión Europea del caso Superliga de diciembre del 23 hizo un toque de atención importante en la gobernanza a la UEFA y a la FIFA. ¿Qué dijo? Oiga, usted está muy bien que tengan el monopolio, cosa que yo apoyo, es necesario que UEFA y FIFA tengan monopolio, pero les dijo, oiga, en los temas de gobernanza tienen que tener, y en la toma de decisiones que se tomen, tienen que tener en cuenta y acordar con todos los actores, con procesos reglamentados, libres, transparentes y discriminatorios. O sea, lo que dice Marc, no solo sentarnos, sino acordar, y lo ha dicho la Unión Europea. Echo de menos, que vamos ya para más de un año de esa sentencia, que no existan y no se hayan adaptado muchas cuestiones, más en la FIFA que en la UEFA, pero también los echo de menos en la UEFA, que hay que adaptarse para tomar decisiones de una forma acordada. Y lo que me preocupa, que como no se avanza, a ver si un día va a venir alguien porque los denuncie, les van a quitar ese monopolio que tienen, que es muy bueno para el fútbol, que exista la UEFA y la FIFA. Y yo les pido a los gestores de la UEFA y de la FIFA la máxima caso a esa resolución y que apliquen las normas de gobernanza que se indica. Porque si no están poniendo en peligro una cosa que está muy bien, que es ese monopolio que tienen del fútbol en Europa y en la FIFA. Y yo echo de menos mucho que llevamos un año y no veo los avances reglamentarios que tendría que haber.
Andrea, you'll have the last word. You work at the European level, and EU law is very relevant, and we heard already how EU law has impacted and will continue to impact the way the leagues are run. Do you see it from a point of a partnership and a mutually beneficial relationship, or is it more of a threat? Because EU law fundamentally can be seen as in conflict with sports specificity and its own rules that have held up the system now for many decades.
You know, I think that here the most important thing is to continuously have a dialogue with the European Union, with the European Commission, and this is what we are doing. We are constantly speaking with them, constantly exchanging and collecting the feedback. As long as we keep this door open and this dialogue open, I mean, I see it much more in terms of a cooperation and in a positive way. And when it comes then to the possible intervention of the governments, of course, I mean, there is a clear difference between cooperation and direct intervention, and cooperation on all those matters that were mentioned before, like protecting the heritage, protecting the the open format of the competitions. This is very good. The problem is when there is direct intervention and then the autonomy of the sports organization could be put in danger. So this is definitely where we do not want to end up.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to finish this talk. We were only able to scratch the surface of many of the issues we brought up, but I think it was very thought-provoking, and I'm sure the starting point of many more discussions. If you want to, a little bit of cross-promotion, if you want to hear more from Javier and me, but mostly from him, there's another talk at 1:45 downstairs. But thank you very much, and thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A short break, and I honestly can tell you the food is good, and maybe protein bar as well for you all in the hall number 8, and we will continue here at 13:40. Also um 13:40 Uhr geht es hier in diesem Saal weiter. Bis dahin eine schöne kurze Pause. Wir sehen uns gleich.